I didn't think anyone would read it.
You're the one who wrote this?
I had to tell the truth. Somehow.
Stop the signing now! The assistant's voice cracked through the boardroom just as Harold's pen touched the paper. Every head turned. The billionaire froze, confusion flashing across his face. Outside, thunder rattled the windows, and a single sheet slid from his folder, covered in numbers that didn't make sense. At the doorway stood a cleaning lady, breathless, clutching that same piece of paper she'd found minutes earlier. No one moved. No one spoke. Who was she? And how did she know what the billion-dollar lawyers didn't? This is the story of a man about to lose everything until an invisible woman changed his fate. Welcome, story lovers. Where are you watching from? Hit the like button and drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. It was 7 a.m. in the glass tower that scraped the clouds of downtown Chicago. The building was quiet, too quiet for what it used to be. Once it had been the beating heart of Harold Kingsley's billion-dollar empire. This financial fortress symbolized power, prestige, and absolute control. But now it was a monument to his downfall. Empty offices, silent phones. The smell of desperation lingered in the air like cheap cologne. Harold sat in his corner office, the skyline stretching endlessly before him, untouched coffee cooling by his hand. In just 1 hour, at exactly 8, he would sign the documents that would end everything: his company, his name, his legacy. The world would call it bankruptcy, but to him it felt more like a funeral. He wasn't just losing money, he was losing the man he thought he was. Outside his office, the world still moved. Cleaning crews worked through the last of their shifts, mopping, dusting, polishing what remained of a once mighty kingdom. Among them was one woman no one ever noticed, a quiet, middle-aged black woman named Lila. Every morning, she arrived before dawn, pushing her cart through marble floors that reflected wealth she would never touch. To most, she was invisible. To Harold, she was just another shadow in a building of ghosts. But that morning, something about her felt different. As she passed his office door, she paused. Maybe it was instinct, perhaps it was empathy, but she felt something wasn't right. Through the glass, she saw him, shoulders heavy, eyes empty, staring at a stack of papers. She didn't really know who he was, but she knew the look of a man about to give up, and what Harold didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that before that clock struck 8, this quiet woman, unseen and unappreciated, would alter the course of his life forever. The minutes crawled toward 8. The rain outside had started, gentle at first, then fierce, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers demanding a decision. Inside, Harold's office glowed with the cold blue light of a computer screen. His lawyer had just sent a reminder. "Be ready at 8:00 sharp. Once you sign, it's official." The message blinked in his inbox, final and merciless. Harold leaned back, his reflection staring back at him from the glass wall. For years, he had been the man everyone wanted to impress. Parties at the penthouse, features in business magazines, the kind of respect that came from power, not kindness. But behind the suits and the deals, he'd built walls around his heart, around his conscience. And now, those walls were collapsing. Down the hall, Lila was finishing her rounds. Her uniform was slightly faded, her shoes worn, her hands rough from years of scrubbing floors no one thanked her for. But her spirit was unbroken. She hummed softly to herself, a tune her mother used to sing while cleaning houses in the segregated South. Every lyric was a quiet rebellion, a reminder that dignity doesn't depend on wealth. As she neared Harold's office again, she noticed something unusual. The door was open. Papers were scattered across the floor, and the man inside was sitting perfectly still, staring into nothing. Lila hesitated, clutching her mop. It wasn't her place to speak, not to a man like that. But something in her heart pushed her forward. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked softly. He didn't respond at first. Then, with a heavy sigh, he said, I'm about to lose everything. Lila didn't know the details, but she recognized the pain. She'd seen it before. Different faces, same defeat, the kind that comes when people stop seeing their own value. I used to think money fixed everything, Harold murmured, almost to himself. Turns out it only hides what's broken. Lila stepped closer, setting her mop aside. Sometimes, she said gently, what's broken just needs to be cleaned up. Different kind of work, that's all. Her words lingered in the air, simple but piercing. For the first time in months, Harold looked up, really looked at her. In her calm, he saw something he'd forgotten existed: grace. Then, as if guided by fate, Lila noticed one of the documents on his desk, an overlooked report buried beneath legal forms. She frowned, picking it up carefully. "Sir, this doesn't look right." Harold glanced over, irritation flashing, until he saw what she meant. Numbers didn't add up. Accounts that were supposedly empty still showed movement. It wasn't an error, it was manipulation. Someone inside his company had been siphoning money, setting him up to fail. The realization hit like a thunderclap. His closest partner, his friend, had been stealing from him, hiding the evidence behind fake debts. Lila's hands trembled as she placed the paper down. "You mean, you weren't supposed to lose everything?" He shook his head slowly, rage and hope battling in his chest. For the first time in weeks, he felt alive again. And as the clock ticked toward 8, Harold Kingsley realized he still had a chance. But to take it, he'd need help from the one person no one in his world had ever thought to listen to. The clock struck 7:58 a.m. The ink pen lay beside the bankruptcy papers like a loaded weapon, ready to end everything with a single signature. Harold's pulse thundered in his ears. Outside, thunder rolled through the city, echoing the storm brewing inside him. He glanced once more at the report Lila had found, numbers that exposed a lie so big it could ruin reputations, maybe even save his. His partner, Richard Ames, the man he had trusted for 20 years, had been funneling company funds offshore, disguising them as unpaid debts. And Harold had almost signed his own destruction because of it. "Sir," Lila said quietly, "you can't let them take this from you. Not if you know the truth now." Her voice was calm but carried weight, like a reminder from someone who had seen injustice her entire life and refused to be silent about it anymore. At 8 hours sharp, his lawyer called again, voice brisk and expectant. "Harold, it's time." He looked out over the city, his city, and something shifted. He wasn't the broken billionaire anymore. He was a man who had just been handed a second chance by someone society refused to see. "No," he said firmly. "Not today." He hung up the phone and turned to Lila. "You just saved my life." For a moment, the office was silent except for the hum of the storm, and somewhere between that silence and the rain, two worlds, one of privilege, one of perseverance, finally met on equal ground. "Dear audience, where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments." By noon, the storm had passed, but inside Harold Kingsley's office, the air still felt charged with something powerful. He had called in auditors, lawyers, and investigators. The truth came pouring out faster than he could process it. Embezzlement, forged signatures, betrayal masked as business. Richard Ames was exposed. What had seemed like Harold's failure turned out to be someone else's deception. When the ABC dust settled, the bankruptcy papers were torn in half and lay crumpled in the trash. The company would survive. But more than that, Harold's soul, buried under years of pride and blindness, had begun to awaken. He searched for Lila later that afternoon. He found her in the lobby, still mopping the marble floor like nothing had happened. "You changed everything today," he said, his voice softer than it had been in years. Lila only smiled. Sometimes, all people need is for someone to notice what's been there all along. From that day on, Harold made a quiet promise. Not just to rebuild his business, but to rebuild the kind of world it stood for. He funded scholarships for underrepresented workers, raised wages, and ensured that no one in his building would ever go unseen again. Lila didn't ask for recognition. She didn't need it, but she had reminded a billionaire of something more valuable than wealth: human decency. And as the city lights flickered that night, Harold wondered, how many lives go unseen each day, waiting for someone to finally see their worth? Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more powerful stories and new videos.